Hello, everyone. It's Michael Jaco with Unleashing Intuition Secrets. And today I'm joined by Juan O Savin. And we're going to talk about, events that are happening right now. I heard your interview just recently that you did with, who's that? The gentleman, I can't think of his name right now. But anyway, it was an excellent interview and outstanding.
Well, we got. I think I did two in the last week with Prim and Jen, and then also with the Whiteds, and Sean Stone. I did one with
Sean Stone. That's the one I was thinking.
There you go. Sure.
Yeah. You have a better memory than I do. Good. So,
well, it's been a very hectic last week or so, and so I think that's the only three I was able to squeeze in, and I've got a couple others that were promised that I would spend a few minutes with, and including you. And of course, I had to push yours back too, so I apologize on that. But
oh yeah, no problem. We're always happy to have you on whenever we get you. So, he brought up a lot of good points about the things that are being revealed right now, and I can validate that. Have never been seen before. I have known them on my level for decades, actually. Some of the stuff that we saw in the last go around and between the election cycles, and that's the stuff I've known what's going on for a very long time. Now everyone knows, everybody's been exposed to that, and that was a really good point that Sean brought up.
Well, let me just say this: there's mischief that's been done in the way that our country is administrated. There have been secret handshake deals that resulted in all sorts of changes in legislation that changed the way our money supply, our money was administered and distributed, the way that so many of the interactions between the government and the people. The Constitution is the contract between the American people and the government. And what's been getting lost more and more every day is that the government works for the American people, not the other way around. And this attitude that we're almost in some kind of a fascist communistic system where we're the servants of the government, or more precisely, the servants of the people who hold the reins of power, the control mechanism of government, that we're somehow subservient to them. And that's what has to be corrected, righted. And that's what this moment is about, is reestablishing who actually owns and controls, our government versus the American people owning and controlling it. Of the people, by the people, for the people, has been lost on many of the people currently pulling and holding the reins of control in our government.
Yeah, that's just absolutely amazing. That's an excellent point that brought up with Sean, and bring it up again, of course, because it needs to be reiterated over and over again, because people don't seem to be getting that. I served our country for 35 years, and it was for protecting us against foreign. And here we are, we have the biggest threat I've ever seen right here in America right now by a foreign government that has come in and basically pretty much close to taking over.
Well, let me put it this way. The scam within the vote system, that was a group of NATO countries primarily that were the hub around which this Dominion fraud occurred. Even beyond that, there was collusion with members of other governments, control mechanisms into other governments. China positioning itself to take advantage of any weakness in our system. Players in the UN willing to take advantage, coordinating their actions to take advantage of this weak moment in American resolve, history, administration, whatever, to seemingly come in to help us with the problems that we have here in the country. In reality, we were at this very vulnerable moment. And people pulling the strings behind the curtains, thinking that we, the American people, weren't going to be able to do anything about it. The reality is, once the American people resolve to go a certain direction in mass, there's no outside power that's going to be able to control us. There's an old saying that I remember from a very young age, somebody that was teaching me history, and he said, no country, no people has ever been conquered from without, from outside of itself. They first had to be conquered from within. They had to collapse internally, and then somebody came in from the outside and took over. If we collapse internally as a people, if we lose our resolve, our focus, our cohesion internally, then all that would happen is an outside power would come in and just fill the vacuum, fill the void, and take over. What's actually happened here over the last year and a half, 2 years, is that slowly at first, but especially over this last year during the election cycle and up through the election, remember, the majority of the people that voted, by a large majority, not a tiny fraction, a large majority of the people voted for President Trump, voted for conservatism, for pulling back the reins of control of government, but through fraud, through voter fraud specifically, through count fraud, they have manipulated the outcome of the election, the vote, and these persons working collusively tried to take over our government by putting their players in positions of authority and power as though the American people put them there, which just isn't true. Right. Now, as that gets reversed, as that gets overturned, as that gets rolled back, the American people will get people back in power that have their interests in mind. To the extent that that doesn't happen, if it wasn't to happen, and I'm telling you that it will, but let's just have a mind game for a second. Let's imagine that this fraud of the vote was allowed to stand, that these people stayed in power and continued to control us. The reality is the vast majority of the American people know, they know in their hearts and they know in their minds. They know by a sense of feeling in their hearts, and they know by the facts that they're seeing. There's a tangibility to it, that what is said to have occurred cannot possibly have occurred. If you saw the rallies across the country that President Trump held and the masses that showed up, and you saw the non-rallies and the non-masses that showed up to support the Biden-Harris crowd, you know, just tangibly, factually, something doesn't add up. So when you see that, and then you realize that a fraud has occurred in mass over the vast majority of the country, there's this consensus. They can say anything they want. They can push any angle they want. They can tell you. Biden won, Biden this, Biden that. And you know, it just doesn't match your own observations. Mm-hmm. One of the things that you teach students when you're teaching science is that you have to get your data. You get your data points and you add it up. And if you end up with a conclusion in your data that at some level you just look at it and go, well, that just doesn't seem like the right answer, and you have to go back and look, usually you'll kind of just intuitively know that's in the zone, okay, and you probably got it. If your answer in the end doesn't match kind of huge blocks of the data that you had, sometimes you just have to go, whoa, something's not right. Did I misadd? Did I move a dot somewhere? Did I forget some piece of the formula? Something doesn't seem right, or it's just intuitively, I got to relook at this because something's not adding up. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of a thing that's been happening for the American people over the last weeks and months. And even though you can't get to the right answer in Congress and in the courts, we've been played this game enough times. This is Charlie Brown with the football getting pulled away. Every second, the American people are waking up more and more. Something got screwed with, something got messed with, and this isn't adding up. And when the mass of the American people move this way or that way or make a decision, there's not enough government. There's not enough police in the government. There's not enough military even to stop the American people from going where they've decided they're going to go in mass. Now, you can try to stop the momentum, but once it gets going, it's like a stampede. Mm-hmm. It's a tsunami. It's just not going to stop. And the vast majority of the American people understand that something is amiss. And so from the other side, from the Biden camp side, they've got fingers holding holes in the dam all over the place, but the surge is coming. And that's what they are scared of, that en masse, the American people are waking up simultaneously across the country, not just in flyover country out in mid-America, but in the major cities. Mm-hmm. That's why, for example, Texas and Mississippi saying, hell no, we're not going to keep our restaurants closed. We're not going to shut down our state. We're opening up. Florida, no, we're opening up. It was way out there in South Dakota. It didn't matter, months and months and months and months ago. Right. But now more and more states are saying, okay, we're done. You're having governors have to back off of their confiscatory, choking positions, controlling commerce, the restaurants, the people, and they're losing their grip. It's like sand slipping out of their hands, and they can feel it.
And that's an excellent point. It took almost a year, kind of a year, for that process to start to unwind as it is right now. The dominoes are falling, like we're talking about. How long are we going to see? Another year before we see the dominoes fall for this other fraud we're looking at? I don't think it's going to be that long. I think it's the pace is quickening.
Yeah, we're in an accelerating moment. I will say this, and I mentioned this several times in some of the other interviews. I don't think I said it on yours, Jacko, but from a biblical perspective, my perception is this is a Jubilee year for America. Now, what's interesting about a Jubilee year, in this theme of a Sabbath, the seventh day of the week is the Sabbath day, and that's when you have to rest, and everybody takes a rest to strengthen up, look to God. It's intended that it's for our health and well-being that we do this, but it's God's day. It's the Sabbath day. It's look to God. But it's not solely focused just on God. It's that when we do that, we ourselves are strengthened because we're rested in that day, that we rest from our labors. So then you go to, in the biblical equation, and you can, even other religions have a similar thing. There's a similar theme. So I'm using a biblical, we're a Christ based Christian culture on the whole here in America, but we have lots of other religious perspectives that are in there, but they all do have a common theme of a rest day. So with that in mind, then there's this biblical theme that there's also 6 years of planting and harvest and everything else. The seventh year is a rest year for the fields, for the crops. You don't plant the crops, you give them a year off. And that way you don't deplete all the nutrients in the soil, and they can replenish, and you'll keep getting good crops. And so every seventh year is a rest year. Every seventh week, in other words, 7 years of weeks, where the seventh year is a rest year. In the 49th year, or 7 times 7 weeks of years, there's what's called a Jubilee year. So you have your 49th year as a rest year, and you have a second year, which is the 50th year, which is also a rest year. So 7 times 7. So the Jubilee year is actually a 2-year rest period. Now, last year in March, we, literally around the change into spring, from winter into spring, we started this national shutdown and the masks and everything, literally going to a type of rest in business and commerce, in our work things. The country literally went to some type of almost a forced rest year. If you were to say that hypothetically that this was a Jubilee moment in America, then a second year would also happen, where business and commerce and planting and everything else wasn't happening like it has previously, that there's some relative rest that's going on. And in the Jubilee year in the Bible, in the scriptures, from a Judeo-Christian perspective, that's when everything is restored. In the rest year, in the Jubilee year, if people had sold off, if your ancestors had sold off property that was an inheritance to your family, it was restored to the original owners in that rest year. So that, say you had parents or grandparents that sold off, essentially leased off, if you will, property that was to your particular tribe or family in a tribe, then it was restored to you in the Jubilee year. And so you didn't have to live with the consequences of a bad decision by your ancestors in your bloodline. You could still be restored those properties for you to be able to make the right decisions, do the right things, build out. Now, somebody sold a property or leased it out and got a good amount of money. Maybe they did something else with it commerce-wise, started a blacksmith shop or something, that made money with that money. And so it wasn't a bad decision, but, you had, people make decisions for all sorts of reasons. But if you got the benefit or if you didn't, those original properties were restored to the original family. So, for example, native tribes across the country, they don't sell native property. They will lease them out on long-term leases, 50 or 100 years. And then when the lease expires, the property goes back to the tribe, and any developments on the property are included usually, so that they don't lose their inheritance. They can sell the value of it for a season, but it's not lost to the family forever. And it makes a lot more sense longer term for families. So in the Jubilee year, all the properties were restored to the original families. Here in America, in reality, our birthright has been stolen, frauded away from us, given away, having to do with how we control the right to print money to foreign entities, these Federal Reserve banks, this right to taxes to death, some kind of a bankruptcy thing that's gone on with our Social Security and all sorts of other things. And we've lived with the consequences of it all of our lives, Chaco, everybody in this audience. And so is there some kind of a financial reset that's coming? Is that part of what's going on here? Remember last year, at the beginning of this whole COVID thing, after interest rates had been moved down by the Federal Reserve because commerce was in trouble, then at a certain point when it was nearly zero on, it's 0.25% or something, Federal Reserve interest rate, then President Trump moved the supervisory authority, the decision-making authorities of the Federal Reserve back under direct authority of the Treasury of Mnuchin, and who himself answers directly to the president. So those actions, those operations were no longer done by the Federal Reserve Board, which, by the way, is all Jesuit. that's a whole nother story in and of itself, but you just take that to the bank.
Thank you.
Yeah. So within that context, that got moved back under a presidential supervision through the Treasury. That didn't flush them out completely. It just removed the teeth and fangs at some level, if you will. People talk about 𝗨𝙗𝗶𝗾𝗂𝗲, 𝗤𝙪𝙩, everything else out there. And that's the conversation referring to that I had over with Sean Stone the other day.
Right.
People thinking that just stopping and ceasing all of these financial transaction authorities, actually, you can't. This is a huge ship, an aircraft carrier of America, sailing through the waters. You don't just turn it on a dime. It's an ocean liner. So there has to be a lot of work, planning, etc., to change course and the way things work. And whatever cure has to happen to get America back on course for we the people, the cure can't be worse than the disease. And so if you just suddenly shut down banking operations and change the money and everything else overnight, it's so disruptive that you could literally kill, thousands, millions of people even. You could cause disruption out between the nations of such a magnitude across the planet that you would cause literally war and chaos that you can't even comprehend right now. So there is Rome wasn't built in a day. And it's very, it's not even sophomoric, it's juvenile to think that we can just shut it off and redo it a different way. And by the way, people are like, we're not going to have to pay mortgages anymore. We won't owe the banks anything, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, let's think about that for a second. Let's say that there was no longer, mortgage and anything else, and we don't owe anybody. Not all contracts are to banks. And by the way, and we're going to get those rich fat cats. Okay, well, who has the mortgages? People with credit ability. So the big guys that have huge credit obligations due to mortgages for houses or bigger houses or buildings or bigger buildings or factories or whole, corporations that are listed on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ or something like that. All those people with loan obligations, the more leveraged you were going into that, the more powerful you would be. The people that own real property, that actually have title deed to property, that own it free and outright and clear, would be damaged in that situation because they were servicing their loans, holding property, holding the goods all the way along. And the people that had a contract would be the ones that where they were, with these high loans, they'd be forgiven it completely. They'd have all the power. And by the way, even the stuff that goes obligation into banks and things like that, at the end of the day, that's actually just a bunch of other people. Your retirement fund, your pension, if you have one, is held through listed companies for the most part, New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, etc. And so if all of a sudden you flush all the banking obligations, what happens is that your pension is now worth less or worth zero potentially. So collapsing the system is not healthy. So those people that think that that's the proper option, there's a lot in play. There's a lot at stake, and people need to understand that the president just did this, president just did that, whatever. Gaming this out, as has been done on supercomputers, to look at all the minutia, all the minor things that had to happen in here, is a very complex thing. There's a lot at stake, and people's well-being, their lives ultimately are at stake here. And we have to consider that, and that things seem to be moving slowly, too slow for most people's druthers. Doesn't mean that it's stopped. It means that there's a lot at stake, and we're maneuvering carefully to get to the right outcome.
Yep. So, your book, Kid by the Side of the Road, is outstanding because you go into a lot of great historical aspects and you tie a lot of stuff together, like you're talking about right now. Your insights. I've always said that, being in the SEAL teams and stuff like that, and being in CIA, you're the kind of guy that I would sit at your feet or your boots and listen to what you have to say with and with rapture. And so it's pretty amazing. When we were in Las Vegas together, I got some insights from people that have known you for a while. And I just want to tell everybody that's maybe wondering who and what you were about, that my level of respect just went to a different level from some of the stuff I heard about your past. So that's up to you if you ever share that or not. But I can tell you from a secret guy that me and other people that I know you deal with, we don't just deal with anybody. You have to have a little skin in the game. So it was a pleasure to get some insights. So
well, that's very generous of you to say. I mean, that was kind of a for those that aren't aware, I Jim Caviezel, the actor from Passion of the Christ and so many other great movies, he had called me and knew that I was going to be in Vegas for some political stuff that I was doing. And so he says, hey, I want to come over and I want to show you this movie that I did. And we're trying to get, work out how we're going to release it. And I just want to show it to you. So I said, sure. Come on over. So, I said, I'll just get, so we can hook it up on the big screen in my suite out there. And then we had like a dozen people that all wanted to show up. And so I said, well, let me see if I can get like one of the private suites that has seating for like 30 people or something. And then that wasn't enough. And so I found a small theater there in the area, and then that wasn't enough. And so I ended up renting a movie theater for like 5 showings. And then we had Jennifer Mack had done that movie, 𝗀𝗃. And so a lot of people were coming in early. Awesome. And, so in a period of about 5-6 days, we ended up renting a theater for, a showing, half dozen showings of the Makings of a Perfect Day, Jennifer Mack's movie, which is excellent. You can go over to Rumble and see that. If you haven't seen it, you got to go see it. And then Jim Caviezel's movie, The Sound of Freedom, the next day. And
dry eye in the audience, I promise. Oh, what a great movie.
It was, like I told people after the first screening, and I told everybody, the credits afterwards, there's some discussion about the aftermath of what's there, and then the credits, and it went on for about 5 minutes, and I needed every one of those 5 minutes to collect myself, to be able to talk with the audience and Jim too. And even where Jim, of course, he obviously acted in it and did it, but he said, same thing, it affects him every time. And very true. It's just such a powerful, and it's based on true story.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, by the way, well, 2 things. First off, we're working diligently right now, and within the next week or so, we'll probably have locked it in, but we have a release date and sequence for it, and it's in the very near future, and have secured the funding for the marketing campaign and like that. And so as a result of this meeting and you showing up and others, we've worked through some of those details, and I think we'll have it locked in the next week or so, hopefully, and we'll be able to announce, actually a release date for the movie, which didn't exist before we did that meeting. Wow. But my main point was, what happened was I called a couple of friends, said, hey, we're going to watch this, why don't you come on out? And then a couple of influencers. Jim had a few friends that he wanted to have come in. And then, guys like you said, well, could I also bring so-and-so? Next thing you know, we had like 400 people flying in on 3 and 4 days notice to Vegas. And then we did this. And my friend Mike Gowan over at South Point Casino accommodated us to get folks in. And on a moment's notice. And Roseanne says that's her favorite place to perform. It's the best casino in Vegas, so many levels. It's also the largest casino in Nevada, but a lot of people don't realize that. So yeah. South Point did us a huge favor, and Mike Gowan deserves just a huge thanks for helping get us in there. And but all of that said, then some of the people that you mentioned, I have a pretty eclectic crowd of friends, and so we had probably literally just shy of a dozen of the top spies on the planet, past and present, that all showed up.
Yeah, that was definitely amazing.
Yeah, no, we had some guys that are absolutely top of the heap in their own realm that all showed up, and it was just a very fun time to rub shoulders. And of course, you got to meet a number of them. We had a couple of private dinners there, and that was just a lot of fun. So thanks
a lot for that. That was amazing.
All of that said, though, it was very serious work. It was a fun thing to get a chance to cross paths with everybody and spend time together. But at the end of the day, we were there on a very specific mission, and that was to familiarize some of the influencers as it built out. This only happened over a couple of days. The way I equate it, in the car racing and stuff like that, back in the 70s, they used to have the thing gumball, and guys that show up on one coast to the other and then race across the country in their cars. Not something that I'm promoting because it's very dangerous for the public, but the whole idea is that just on a moment's notice, everybody shows up and goes racing. We put out the call to people, hey, we're doing this in a couple of days over the weekend. And suddenly we had people flying from all over the country on just a moment's notice. And it was shocking. It was just going to be a one theater with, 30 people, then it's 100 people. And, we didn't have big enough theater. And then it's, multiple showings till we tied it up day and night. And that was just because so many people came in that wanted to participate. And it was the subject matter that I think was the biggest part of it. It wasn't just a let's all go have fun thing, although it was a great time for networking. The key word here was that the movie, Jim Caviezel's movie, Sound of Freedom, it goes against this human trafficking, especially of kids, and the pedophilia. And that's a, subject matter that is so critical that we as a society have to address, have to stop, both here in America and across the world. And so the movie, people will be having all sorts of action thrillers coming out and various movies as the theaters start to open up again. Yet this subject, if we're going to get America back on track and the world back on track, a lot of the corruption, a lot of the control that has happened behind the scenes of the people who are our leaders goes back to this captured, they've been blackmailed, honeypotted, they're participating in things that are actually extremely evil, and those become controls for them. And if anybody thinks that I'm overstating it, what's Epstein Island all about? What was that all about? It was about getting people under these types of controls, not just in politics, but also in science. Remember, Epstein was having all these leaders from the sciences from around the world, from these universities coming in there. He had this big interest in science. Well, and what's going on there? Even into this whole COVID thing. How many of these people that are pushing a particular angle have some dark involvement in sinister things, literally satanic or evil? And by the way, in this cancel culture moment, which you've been a victim of because they pulled your shows down that we've done, and that's why you had to go behind a paywall. in this cancel culture moment, we can't talk about this kind of stuff. Well, it's real and it's happening. So acting like we can't talk about it, well, who's worried about us not? It doesn't want us to talk about it. The people that are involved. And even within those groups, those oligarchic internet, platforms and providers, how many of them have people in the system at even high levels who are involved in this kind of chicanery, who have something to hide? Why are they so interested in canceling out this conversation? We know it's real. Epstein Island is real. All of those things that happened were real. Children were the victims. They weren't adults showing up there. There were children showing up there that were being used so that they could get people on camera and then manipulate them. And they're in positions of power and authority. The people showing up in those boats at Epstein Island weren't the janitor, okay? They were people in high political office, appointed, elected, the courts, all sorts of things. And they were being targeted to be invited to be there, to then be compromised, because then these people could control them. And who were these people associated? What was Epstein associated with? What was Ghislaine Maxwell associated with? Intelligence operations, right. CIA, MI6, Mossad, multiple other locations. And then this is just one of these locations. It's not just Epstein Island. So then when we come back to the movie Sound of Freedom, it may seem to be just a movie about trafficking, but at much larger levels, who's actually being targeted here? Not just the children, but the control locations, the persons in positions of control, including how they're promoted, only promoted into these positions of authority, getting the money to run in campaigns, getting appointed. You wonder why the guy that's got all the right connections, all the right history in school and all that, and he can't get promoted past a certain point, and another guy gets promoted, and you go, well, that guy, his skill sets, his knowledge, his expertise isn't near this other guy. Yeah, but behind the scenes, it's a secret handshake to promote somebody that will be controllable in the future. And that's what's going on. And it's this pedophilia, I would contend, it's my contention, has a huge part to do with it. And you go back also, look at the WikiLeaks. What is it that got people wound up back in the 2016 election cycle and pushed the vote over the top for Trump? It was the disclosures of the spirit cooking and the related issues that go into pedophilia, where the campaign manager for Hillary's campaign was involved in things. Stuff was disclosed that pulled into question whether or not there was aspects of pedophilia involved in his life, in his brother's life. And so that was a bridge too far. Then that's been pushed down, mashed down, blown off during all this interim period of time, again, with the Hunter Biden stuff. The pedophilia stuff has come out a little bit, but it hasn't come out completely. So that's out in the future here. So when we have a conversation, Jocko, related to this movie, Sound of Freedom, and the subject matter there, that is not disconnected from the current political world environment. It's directly connected to the way that the media sources are chosen and that are promoted, that we're using. Hollywood. If you want to talk about pedophilia, you got to go to Hollywood. You want to talk about pedophilia, you got to go to what's going on with all these politicians and in the university system, who's being promoted and put in there. You got to go into the businessmen. Remember, even Wired magazine, they're talking about how you do blood transplants from children, youth, to wealthy individuals who can afford it in order to get the human growth hormones that give them some youth and vibrancy. And the assertion has been all along that that's some of what was going on at Epstein Island, was these blood transfusions from youth to older persons that were these gazillionaires.
Yeah.
So
it's incredible. I've seen this stuff overseas, and I pointed it out to people. So it's nice now having an audience that we can start to disclose this information. There's a lot of us, when we saw that movie, and some people were saying, are we ever going to get to see it? Yes, you're going to get to see it, because Juan brought a lot of people in that are influencers. I have been hitting beating this drum on pedophilia for a year now. And when people would come on and say, people aren't going to want to watch this, I'm like, wait, you'll see. And we would have hundreds of thousands of views, where people would say, oh, we won't even have a few thousand. People are waking up to this. All of us that saw that movie were like, if this movie gets out there, this movie is going to change consciousness of the world. So it's
not even if, it's when we're on it. We had a number of people that are very, well-to-do that were present, who said, we got to be part of this. We got to make this happen. In fact, a couple of them are down in Florida right now, related to the CPAC stuff and the build out of what's got to happen here. And they've pledged that they'll cover us for, it's a business thing. It's not a gift, but that they see the business relevance, besides the fact that there's just a stand up and be counted, make it happen. This has to happen. If there was any question because of COVID and the theaters being shut down, well, now that that's beginning to reverse, they need to be in to have a piece of this being done, that their boots on the ground there need to be counted, because the subject matter is so critical to us as a nation. If you're going to get the country back on track, part of getting the country back on track is to attack, not just talk about, but attack this pedophilia culture, this victimization of children that has happened at so many levels here, not just in our country, but around the world, within the context of our complacency or even support. And let me just say this, Jocko, and this is an important point. I've said it a couple other places over the last few days, but I haven't said it on your channel. If somebody's hearing it a second time or third time, I don't care. There's maybe people here that haven't heard this. So I want to say it again. When Gaddafi took power in '67 from Idris, King Idris in Libya, the U.S. had its largest Air Force base outside of the continental U.S. on planet Earth. The largest U.S. Air Force base in the world was 𝗎𝙗 Air Force Base in Libya, in Tripoli. So we had a huge American presence there, because that was where we did a lot of our overflights, SR-71 and like that, and YouTube before it, out of Libya, looking at places where the Russians were at, etc., and across Africa and stuff like that. And so this was a very important strategic base for us. When Gaddafi took control, and by the way, Gaddafi used to go over and eat at the British Officers Club and the American Officers Club at the bases all the time. He was being groomed for something. There's a lot more to the story than people realize today.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I know so much more about that than I've had a chance to talk about, but I will at some point in time.
Excellent.
But the reason I say that is that they had slave bazaar there in Tripoli. And one of my friends who was a very senior officer there at 𝗎𝙗 Air Force Base, he said, we wanted to, they would sell these young girls that had been taken captive, kidnapped from Northern Europe, the young blonde girls, and brought down to Tripoli, and then were sold in the slave bazaar, brought down through Turkey, brought down through Italy, and brought into Tripoli. And then these girls, young girls, were being sold in the slave bazaar. And so the guys at the base wanted to try and get in there to the slave bazaar and buy some of these girls and try to get them home. And they, and it wasn't just girls, by the way, it was also boys.
Oh yeah.
But they were under standing orders not to go anywhere near that or having to do it. So what my friend and others did is they actually would get money to friends there in Tripoli who had people that would go in and they couldn't do it much, but they would get a child here or there that was especially young or vulnerable, and then try to get them out, buy them and get them out of the country. And they could only do a little bit. It was very, very, very hard. The logistics are just almost incomprehensible. But they would have success once in a while in getting a child out. There's a Jewish saying, he who saves one life, it's as though they saved the whole world. It's a very emotional thing. Mm. You do the best you can with what you got.
Yeah.
And there's moments. What's it like if you just save one person from that hell? And so when Gaddafi came into power, Gaddafi closed down the slave bazaar in Tripoli. Mm-hmm. And that irritated it went against very powerful forces. Mm-hmm. And that hated him for doing that. Out through time, Gaddafi was very generous with the people there in Libya. And I haven't gone soft. I'm not pinko. I haven't gone commie on anybody. I'm just telling you that as much as he was a problem child, there was things going on there that aren't exactly as advertised out to the public. Yeah. And so he had accumulated this vast amount of gold, about $350 billion worth of gold that he had hidden away there in Libya. Saif Gaddafi was negotiating with the Rothschilds, who'd gone hunting and stuff up in Austria and down in Australia, had been over to their residences in Greece, and had been negotiating because he wanted to, Gaddafi wanted to create a currency in Africa that was gold backed. And so he wanted to use that gold to create this gold backed currency, and Saif was doing the negotiations. And that would compete with other currencies around the world. And that was the context of what was going on behind the scenes during this time period. While at the same time, you had Syria, things going on in Syria that wanted to run this oil and gas pipeline from Saudi Arabia up to Europe. And Syria was in the way. And so there's all these nation state level things taken on behind the scenes. When we went in and provided the air cap, started this whole fight in Libya, like that he'd done all these terrible bad things, and then put the air cap in, that didn't allow any of his people to move around to protect their own stuff internally. Then it was just a matter of the clock ticking before Gaddafi fell and was killed and taken out of power. And in fact, I had one of my guys was on the plane up in Toronto, engines running for hours and hours and hours, with the delegation that was going to go down and escort Gaddafi from Africa to an island location where he was going to go into exile. And that time was used to convey his location to French troops, who then came in and pinned down that caravan, and then he was captured and killed. But he was actually on his way to exile at that time. And then, of course, we installed this, president of Libya, who was this professor from the University of Washington here in the United States, who'd been parked there, a total CIA, operation, with somebody that wasn't, hadn't been in Libya, practically his entire life as though he's going to run Libya. It's just a big scam. But anyway, what else happened though was that in that negotiation, when Saif had been working to try to create a dinar backed by gold, it was an African dinar with this money. They had gotten enough information to ascertain where most of that gold was located in the various places that it was spread around Libya. And so when Gaddafi fell, all of that gold was eventually located and taken out of Libya with $350 billion. Now, I say all of that because where that gold was going to be laundered through in large measure was through American Barrick gold mining operations, allegedly.
Right.
And those operations in Haiti were where Hillary's brother was on the board of a gold mining operation, a mining operation in Haiti. They were going to launder that through there as though it was mined in Haiti. Well, if Haiti had $1 bazillion worth of gold, they'd have already begun mining it and they'd be fabulously wealthy. It's all a scam. And American Barrick was going to supervise that, allegedly, by the way, based out of Toronto. And but the gold disappeared. And so what else is going on in Haiti? Haiti is where this child trafficking was also taking place in very large scale trafficking operations, and still is. And so, in fact, the follow-on to the movie Sound of Freedom is the movie that's being just finished up in the writing, is based on the trafficking stuff going on in Haiti, because it's that critical and it's as compelling as The Sound of Freedom is. The next one will be off the charts. All of that long conversation. I was actually
in Libya after my friends were killed. I came in and recovered some of their effects and some of their bloody body armor and stuff like that. So being an observer, SEAL Team 6, observing things and observing things as security counter in CIA, we were told, because we know how to get information too. We were told that the gold went to the Americans, and that the NATO allies that were involved Libya was basically divvied up to them.
Yeah.
Also, there was trafficking of arms from Gaddafi's warehouses that went to ISIS. So,
totally. I mean, somewhere in here, we'll tell the rest of the story.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I mean, within hours of even the incident there, the Benghazi thing, I was talking with folks explaining what was going on, because we had all these training bases that were spread around Benghazi, and they're training these groups for their going up into Syria. And the whole incident prior to Benghazi, they were essentially using Libya as a weapons depot, transferring arms that were supposed to go to other Mideastern states, and they were transshipping them through Libya, and then taking those arms up to Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey, and basing them in these various locations right on the border in preparation to go into Syria. So It was claimed.
You do have some deep insights. I'm very impressed. So also, Gaddafi was his people were the most educated people in the Middle East.
Yeah.
He had built high-rise, because he basically said, hey, I'm taking off the restrictions. I'm going to be part of the West now. He built these high-rise hotels. He was getting ready to allow tourists to come in. There was a brand new city that was built by an emperor just before Rome fell there in Libya, and it was basically lost when Rome fell, and was covered up with sand. Pristine, the most perfect Roman ruins anywhere in the world. Unbelievable. So I saw it deteriorate very quickly. once he was gone, we started seeing the terrorist groups come in and taking over very, very quickly. It was total travesty.
Well, I mean, the best ancient ruins in the world, other than possibly the one that's been uncovered in Turkey here recently, where they found it buried, the best ancient ruins in the world are all in Libya. In fact, in the months just prior to the whole move to take out Gaddafi, and not even months, weeks before that all started, Bill Gates was coming back from something in South Africa, and then made a detour, stopped in Libya, and a friend of mine who was in a position in high office in Libya, actually set up the tour and supervised it, where Gates was taken out to some of the and his entourage were taken out to some of the ancient sites and toured them. Mm-hmm. And it would be my contention that many of these people knew what was about to happen and were licking their chops to go out and get access to what was about to happen in Libya. One of the folks, one thing, students, they call anybody up into their mid-30s really students in Libya. It's just a cultural thing. But students of a number of the prominent families in Libya went out and protected the ancient ruins sites across Libya, literally stood there with arms, like, armed security, so that while this whole war in Libya, Libya was happening, they were at these ancient sites, buildings and coliseums, things like that, protecting them. So my friend's son, one of my friends, who was a minister of a certain department there in Libya, he went out and was with a number of other students protecting this site from being destroyed by these ISIS-like groups that went by other names. And he got shot in the arm, got shot in the hand. It came up out through his elbow and then got infected. And so he was going to lose his arm. And then through friends, we were able to get him up to Crete. And then he got treated and was able to save his arm. But he wasn't trying to do anything terroristic. He wasn't trying to overthrow the government or work with the terrorists, whatever. They were just protecting these ancient sites. That's another story that still has to be told, because, these sites have been around for thousands of years, and they were just trying to protect them for the future, because once they're blown up, gone, destroyed, whatever, then there's nothing there. So they weren't even trying to, be on one side or the other government just to protect these sites from being destroyed, because these terrorists were really coming in to take down these ancient sites, to destroy this history. And so a lot of people in Libya knew that there was a value for them out into the future, that they needed to protect that. And a number of them lost their lives. For other people who might say, well, it was just a building, it's just whatever. Well, it's their history. And they felt the need to do that. So, and all of that, though, to say also, and where I didn't finish the point a few minutes ago, is that after Gaddafi was taken down, and now today, and now for a decade, the slave bazaar has been open and operating freely.
So yep.
So when we facilitated taking Gaddafi out of power, the people that were able to come back into power reinstituted the slave bazaars in Tripoli. They're operating today in our name, with American involvement. Our military, our State Department, the American people's complicity. Slave trading is going on right now, especially of children in Tripoli, and we have responsibility for it. If you break it, you bought it.
Yep.
We have to stop that. We have to get that back under control. We cannot allow or participate in or have people in our name doing things that facilitate that happening. And the same is true in Haiti. As they went through that earthquake and everything else, well, we came in to do good and to help. Yeah, a lot of those people that came in to do good in Haiti did very well indeed, trading children.
Clintons, yeah, definitely. So there, the cancel culture we're seeing right now, you were just talking about, canceling culture there in Libya. Of course, ISIS has been, involved in canceling, blowing up ancient monuments throughout the Middle East wherever they were. So everyone needs to look at what's going on right now, and it doesn't stop until we say that's enough. So you're completely right, where we own it because we're allowing it to happen. But if we stand up to it, like we're seeing these states that are opening, doing away with the mask mandates, and we see governors that are under pressure because finally people are starting to push back on that, we're going to see those dominoes fall soon. So when we see these things, the American people have so much power. And yes, the government doesn't own us. They don't tell us what to do. We tell them what to do.
Well, the question is, has that gotten out of balance, and how are we going to get back in place? Because I would tell you that while the correct thing is that we tell the government what to do, something's gone awry over the last many decades, and we have to get it back under control. And if people in positions of authority in government are not protecting the legitimacy, the validity of the vote of the American people, then they are illegitimate. If there is a active operation or operations that are protecting a twisted, tricked vote, protecting people who tweak the vote for a particular outcome that favors their crowd, and it's not an honest vote of the American people. If there's vote fraud being protected, that is not in the interest of the American people. That's not fair. That's not lawful. A government that protects illegal voting is not itself a legitimate government, whether it be at the local level or the federal level. And when you cannot, people think that this stuff has been heard in the Supreme Court and found to be wanting. That's not true. It hasn't been heard at all. They keep saying that there's no standing. The states brought a matter before the Supreme Court. Okay, and then the Supreme Court said that these states didn't have standing to challenge something. We have not actually had legitimate hearings on whether or not the vote was fraudulent. We've just had hearings, court hearings, on whether or not the people bringing a challenge to the vote have, standing to even make a claim or hear the facts. And so we're still working to get to some kind of legitimate, lawful review of the facts and determination in a legal setting as to whether or not there was fraud against the American people on the vote, either at the local or the national level. Those are still working their way through the courts. This isn't done yet. And then on the congressional side, they're going to leave standing laws that are protecting illegal voting, systems that don't count the vote rightfully, that trick the vote, that flip the vote. Nah. If Congress and the courts are not protecting the American people, then who is going to protect it? And what you're really seeing right now is that Mao said all power emanates from the barrel of a gun. It's not something that we like to talk about. It's not comfortable, nice talk. But the reality is that's a very true statement. In the American system, it's just the same. When people violate the law, does the police officer show up without a gun? No, he's got the gun on his hip. And if you're Al Capone and you show up with a machine gun, well, we got federal officers show up with machine guns and bigger. We're going to exercise power against those that, are trying to steal from us. If you're a really good bank robber and you get out of the bank and you get in the getaway car and you get around the corner, we don't say, darn, you're off bank property. Okay, whatever you got, I guess you get to keep it. Bullshit. We chase you down. We'll run you down. We'll corner you and we'll take you into custody. One way or another, we're going to, stop that. That's the American way. And to the extent that it hasn't happened, doesn't mean that the law is not going to, cease to exist. It means that maybe you got some people that weren't enforcing the law, but eventually the American people are going to get this under control. They're going to get it back. And I think that's this moment that we're in. This lawlessness, this looking the other way on matters of the Constitution, this contract between the American people and its government. If people in government think that they are going to get away with acting unconstitutionally, endlessly, and they're going to pull the wool over the American people's eyes, I say that day is quickly passing now, and that this is a Jubilee year, and we're about to enter into the second year of a Jubilee year, and that's when everything is restored. Another year of rest and commerce, and maybe not as productive as we normally are, but that's because we're still addressing getting our country back, getting back on track, stopping all of the mischief and the wrong that's been going on in the country for a very long time, and that this fallow season is a turning to God moment, a recounting what's important, returning it to the original ownership, and a reset for us as a people. First, for us internally, get America back on track, get America going the way it's supposed to go, that it was designed to go, and then going and helping the rest of the world, getting our house in order first, and then going out into the world, not to be our brother's keeper, to enslave our brother and sister around the world, but to be our brother's brother. And that's the mission for America. And along the way we do that is business of America's business, reindustrializing America, stopping all these chokeholds that we have on commerce and industry. So we have a basket to minister out of, to do things with, not an empty basket, not a bag full of holes. We're going to get our house in order, and then we're going to have the wherewithal to go out and help others around the world to do likewise, and to stop this spirit of lawlessness and these evil people, these Satanists really, that have gotten the reins of control across the world. If you go into the Bible, into the Old Testament, the people in the Canaan land, these children of Cain, that the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob went in to take out of power. The thing that was so evil about those people, they were Baal and Moloch worshipers. And these Baal and Moloch worshipers, one of their practices in order to have a great gain, to have a full harvest, was that they made their children to pass through the fire. That's a very Sunday school Bible teacher way of saying they roasted their children alive as offerings to Satan. They sacrificed their children in order to have a rich harvest, to get gain. that's the horror that was there. If there is children being traded around the world for any reason, if there's human trafficking at any level, it's the grossest, most horrid thing that can possibly exist. If we turn a blind eye to that, if we look the other way, then there's sins of commission, things that you do, and there's sins of omission where you look the other way. You fail to act. You don't do something positive that you must do as children of Adam, as humans. When we know that this is going on, we can't look the other way. And that we have had some complicity, sins of omission, by allowing people to get into power and hold power, who have these tendencies, who are involved in these types of activities. We as a people must come against it, both in America and around the world. And so, again, I say that you want God to bless America? What part? What part can God have any part of in blessing America if we're allowing these evils to take place around us and we're not doing anything to stop it? It is that simple. People can say, well, he's just getting further and further off base. Well, am I? You want God to bless America? You want to have rich harvest? You want to have goods and protection and safety from enemies or whatever? Really? Well, if you can't protect the innocent, if you can't protect the defenseless in your midst around you, why would you, if you're not going to protect them, why would you think God has to protect you? It's a two-way street. You do what you're supposed to do as a human with the knowledge you have, and God blesses you because of it, and because you're honoring that. And I'm telling you that there's evil going on here in America and around the world, and we have complicity in it. We have to put an end to it. We have to stop it. And that's what WikiLeaks showed you and taught you. If you look the other way, you act like it didn't happen, that stuff isn't true, then you're part of the problem. Mm-hmm. And that's what's been going on during all of these intervening years. And if you think nothing's happening right now, then you're not paying attention. Hello, what's Joe really doing? What's he got control of? Who's blocking him? The courts aren't blocking him or the crowd around him. Congress isn't blocking him or the crowd around him. All sorts of things are happening, but it's happening at the only level, the last safety for the American people in the world that exists. And it's the American military, and they haven't given back over control. They haven't passed the baton to the next administration because they don't see that it's valid based on an internal analysis, based on the Director of National Intelligence report delivered on the 19th of January. So is this over? Not in your life. Watch.
Yep, I totally agree with you. And, it's just funny because, I had a dream though that I kind of mentioned it to you a little bit that, I saw your 7-year type thing in my dream. I'm not going to go into detail about it, but then I come on and I'm working at the gym and I'm listening to one of your interviews and you're talking about how long ago you said Trump should get his contractor buddies to build a fence.
Oh, here. Okay, hold on. Let me just read this for you. This is fun. Okay.
Oh yeah, beautiful. Bring it up. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So
now this book is amazing because I know you were on one talk show where there was a beautiful woman there that was talking about how Jennifer, she's talking about how she has like a class and they broke the book down into 3 parts and they get together and talk about that book. It's amazing.
Well, that's very sweet of let me give you the background. In 2015, I had some friends that came to me and wanted me to assist in the Trump campaign out of New Jersey. And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, the problem is a presidency. It's not just a person. So as soon as people think that you're going to get a person elected and they're going to go change the whole world, they don't understand that's just the pointy end of the stick, but there's so much more, the people, the appointments, everything that goes with it. It's not just a person. So the reason that we have the political system kind of the way it is. People come up through the ranks, they get allies, they get constituencies, they get a theme, a thread through their life. And then when you elect a president, you're really electing kind of a body of people, associates, to come into power to take things a certain direction. It's a whole ocean liner of aircraft carrier of a mindset. And what I didn't see at the time was a depth in the team around Trump to pull that off. And so I was like, well, the problem is, that they're just not, there's so many more people that are needed to pull this off. And so I said, I just didn't see where there was an angle that I thought it was going to be worthwhile or work. The aspect of that I wasn't really fully dialing in was as President Trump said, he was asked to run. He was invited to run. There has been a military intelligence side of this operation trying to recapture America that's been there for decades. And so as he has been in power, that has emerged. But the weakness that I identified to begin with was these appointments around President Trump. That's, getting people that actually understood a Trump-centric policy perspective of, how Trump views the way things should work in the world and in America based on his understanding of the system, the machine, whatever. And so a lot of the people came in, took offices, and then they wanted to do it just like the old way. They didn't want to do it the way that Trump was trying to re-engineer things. Same thing happened with Reagan, because you couldn't get people that would operate or think in the way that the leader had in mind. They just go off, they get in office, and they just go do the same thing that's been happening all along. It's because of this deep state mentality. These players don't care who's elected; they're going their way because they have their own interests. They're who they are. So what I said back in 2015, and I said it first, I think, on John Wells' show, and I've said it many times since. And then I said it in the book here in an interview that I did that this chapter is taken from. That, let me just read it. This is from page 49. We have a long road ahead, and I don't think Washington, D.C. can really be cleaned up. It can't be fixed because it's already fixed. It's as fixed as a rigged game. My advice to President Trump, that has a pleasant and reverent ring to it, by the way, but this was from an interview. It was done years after President Trump took office. But I said this pretty much exactly the same way back in 2015. Sorry about that. President Trump should hire all his contractor buddies and have them get together as much fencing materials and heavy equipment as they can possibly muster. Then bring it all to D.C. under the protection of U.S. Marine Corps guards utilizing close-in air support. They should proceed to surround D.C. with multiple layers of chain link fence and concertina wire, like we did at the city of Fallujah in Iraq. Simultaneously, we need to have all available military and armored National Guard units surround the city at the Beltway. That's kind of like what happened back coming up in the inauguration, right? Did you see all that? The way they had the city surround everything. I dropped down a couple of paragraphs. President Trump should also request that all patriot citizens show up for this national effort with all the toilet bowl cleaner they can lay their hands on. After which they'll provide that to the military guard units so that the cleaner can be dispersed into that soupy DC cauldron ASAP. God in his heaven knows it's going to take several flushes and plenty of Drano to clear those filthy pipes. Wow. All the while, the citizen soldiers will be keeping a sharp eye out for any of the blue-dyed toilet water and swamp creatures that might be attempting an escape through tunnels coming out at strange places, some even hundreds of miles away. By now, many of you know about the underground tunnels, including the DUMBs, deep underground military bases. So we are not dropping our guard. I say we carry out 40 days of 40 flushes. Hey, just to be sure, God knows, maybe the total flushes should be more like 41 or 44. We'll see. Wow. So, the city was surrounded with this fencing and concertina wire and barricades and everything else coming up on the inauguration back in January 20th, and it stayed there for quite a long time. We're not through all of that. This isn't done yet. There was a request made, I think yesterday, that from Congress that the Guard troops remain stationed here in Washington, D.C. For many more months, essentially perpetually at this point in time. What you see going on and the way it's portrayed in the media isn't exactly the whole story. That would be my contention to everybody in the audience.
Nice. And, for me, I've been part of military operations, for 35 plus years, combat zones and so forth. And it has a lot of the same feel, I'll just put it that way, of events that are going on. So I know a lot of people get frustrated, time frames come and go that everybody was counting on. Like today, people were like, there was going to be something happen today. You can't get wrapped up in a day. Can't get wrapped up in things like that, because in a military operation things change on a dime. Talk about that.
Well, and actually, and what we're referring to, there was money that was set aside December 10th that was paid on a contract in advance for the barricades and fencing to be in place for a March 4th, and it was specified as an inaugural event. Nothing more than that. It just says inaugural event from March 4th through the 6th. That's it. Now I can tell you, I'm here in DC right now, and the fencing and barricades for the most part appear to be all down in most places. I haven't had a chance to venture out too much since I got in, but could that change? Huh? It might. In military operations, you feign certain things. You do things that can throw your enemy off. They troll us, we troll them. World War II, for all the world, Hitler knew we were going to land at Calais, and he didn't take action in time at Normandy. And we got a beachhead in, and then the rest was history. And you only had a certain window of time that you could do that in, where you had the high tides, because they had all these obstacles on the beaches. They knew that we were getting ready to come. They were just looking for where we would land. So we're in this moment in time when there's a lot at stake, a lot in play. Anybody that tells you to know exactly what's going to happen, or something didn't happen exactly when they thought it was supposed to happen, in a military operation, you don't let everybody know everything to the last detail, even down through the ranks. A lot of times there's intentional disinformation, even at high levels, so that the enemy might find out just exactly what you want them to know through surreptitious means. So there's a lot going back and forth. There's a lot at stake. We're kind of watching, at arm's length. If we knew precisely what the next moves were, then that would tell me somebody in a command position was doing exactly the wrong thing because the word's getting out in the wrong way. So in a generic sense, yeah, both sides know that a landing is going to have to happen, and that the materials have been set up ready to do a landing, and it's going to be some beach in Europe. Which beach? Well, there's only certain ones that make sense because of their structure, their layout, their location. So, you feint one way and you go the other. That's as simple as any maneuver in football, basketball, any sport, to throw your opponent off. We're playing Casino Royale for planet Earth. There's a lot at stake. People need to take deep breaths, but at a larger level, do they know we're coming? Yeah, they know. They're scared shitless. They know we're coming and we're not backing off, and the American people aren't going to buy into this fraud of an election. How's it going to play out exactly? We'll see. But it's coming, and it's not going to stand. And they know it, and we know it. And if you don't know it, you're not paying attention. American people aren't going to put up with this shit.
It's beautiful. And Juan, I'll put the links to your book down in the description box so that people can have access to it. I'll give you the link to this video. This was live on my secondary Facebook channel or YouTube channel. So hopefully it'll stand. We'll see how long, but I'll have this copied and posted in other sites on my Facebook and Instagram as well. So
well, and by the way, Jocko, we have been talking about for a little bit, but we're making huge leaps and bounds over at 107daily.com. My platform now. We've gone through a couple of wars already, and somewhere down the road we'll talk about it with precision. But it's amazing what other powers to be have tried to do to stop us. We're actually growing stupid fast. People have no concept. But I want to host your show over at our platform and these other shows that internet providers have. Anybody that's been canceled out in this cancel culture thing, bunch of the hosts that you love that haven't been able to do stuff, we're going to have a home for them there, and we got plenty of room to do it. It's amazing from a technology standpoint, what we have, what's coming online. We won't have anybody between us and the backbone of the internet. And so we're in great shape. What you see in the next several weeks, next 45 days is going to be stunning. And I'm looking forward to that because we're not going to be canceled out, and they're not going to have a position to cancel us out. And we're building for something that's huge. So, I'm not saying take and don't post your show other places, but we're going to have it over at ours, and you're not going to get canceled out. And the same with a lot of these other hosts that you love. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to have First Amendment rights, and we're not going to be shut off by a bunch of pieces of shit assholes who think they know what we should and shouldn't be able to talk about. We're Americans. We're going to have the conversation, and they're not going to shut us up. So there you go, bro.
All right.
And by the way,
by
the way, in case anybody wonders, we still got this. We're fine. We're going to make it through this. It's the other guys that are sweating bullets that, are really literally sweating blood right now.
That chicken ship already.
Yep. We got this. It's going to be fun. Keep your powder dry. Take some deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy the show.
All right.